Yeah, it's definitely fun to kind of keep building the ecosystem stuff. Yeah, to kind of keep the ball rolling here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. It's hard. It's equity is not easy.
Yes, and so yeah, we're live now, so we'll go. Well, I guess this time we were supposed to be. I guess we still got a minute to go, even though we're live here. But we're trying to make sure the Facebook thing get up and running.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah, so we'll start talking a little bit about the. I'll give a good introduction of what the Startup in the Box is all about,
Great.
and we can kind of move forward from there.
All right, exciting.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing about all the things up in Atlanta and throughout the Southeast here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm trying to wait till the stage light up, but it's taking its time to light up the transition over.
Oh, okay, so we're not live just yet. Okay.
We're live, but I'm waiting on the stage so the people that are in the networking, they can actually come over to the stage. That's one of the beautiful things about this platform is that people can network together and learn from each other. So that's pretty fantastic. All righty, we're live. Welcome everybody out there to Startup on the Blocks. We're excited to be here tonight. We have a special guest, Miss Lakeisha French, and we're going to let her introduce herself in a minute. But first, I want to tell the new people a little bit about Startup on the Blocks, and we're all about trying to an inclusive ecosystem, trying to get more Black and brown founders into the ecosystem and trying to offer them an opportunity to network on a weekly basis every Thursday evening, and also offering connecting them with some resources throughout the country and here in Florida as well. So tonight we have our guest Lakeisha, and we're going to let her introduce herself in a few seconds here. But first, I want to let you know about our guest next week. We're going to have Tom Cheekmore, and he's a fantastic guy. He's mentored a lot of the Black and brown founders. They went through his training program, and he's a pretty fantastic guy. So he knows what it takes to for a startup to succeed. He had his first exit way back in 2010, so he's got a lot of history and a lot of experience. I had the opportunity to be in one of his boot camps back in 2016. So I also wanted to announce after our last pitch competition last month, we're going to have an open house for aspiring founders and tech professionals here at the Kukua Institute on June 12th from 1 to 4. And we want to invite all of our any founders out there. We want everybody to come in and network and see each other in person if possible, but we will have a connection online for those as well. And that following Monday, we're going to kick off our pre-accelerator program for the semi-finalists and the finalists from our last pitch competition. And so we want to get everybody to meet each other and get the show up on the road. And I'll back up here. Gulf Powers came on as a founding sponsor for Startup on the Block. So we appreciate their support, and we'll be reaching out for more of the local organizations to kind of get some support for what we're doing to move it forward. Okay, Lakeisha. What's the correct way to pronounce your first name there?
Yeah, Lakeisha, you had it right.
Fantastic. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so welcome to Startup on the Blocks. And you may think that name sounds a little crazy, and it's probably a little crazy, but we're here in historic Belmont the Villiers, one of the nationally, people have been hearing about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, but Belmont the Villiers was the Black Wall Street in Pensacola.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yep. And so it's a lot of history. And I tell people, and it's kind of hard for some people to believe, but people like Sidney Poitier had business interests here, Mary McLeod Bethune, Booker T. Washington visited here and spoke about all the entrepreneurship going on right here in this historic place. So we got some some big shoes to fill, to do what those folks did, back in the day. So
Amazing.
welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yes. So I'm Lakeisha French. I am the president and CEO of Preneurology Global. We help build emerging innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems with equity, particularly for Black and Brown entrepreneurs.
So what's interesting, like as an entrepreneur and as a founder, like we all have family in different stage, and so so it's tough being an entrepreneur sometimes when you're trying to do your family, raise your family, and
Yes.
yeah, and so we've I know what's her name that is working with you all in the Atlanta Advanced Technology Development Center there.
HATC. Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what is her name. She was on as a guest a few weeks ago.
Blanca.
Yeah, Blanca. Yeah. And she
that's like one of my sisters. Yes.
Yeah, and she made me realize, and we've noticed that too, because a lot of our founders they're raising young children, and they also may have a regular business, and they're trying to do a startup business, and so you have all these priorities and things you have to do, so you kind of have to figure out how to balance them as
Oh,
well.
yeah, it's real. So I always tell people I am a mompreneur.
Okay.
So yeah, I have two little ones, interesting. They are 9 and 5, and
Okay.
So being a CEO and so helping, but provides a layer and level of empathy. I think that is necessary when you're helping to ecosystems. And so with us building, helping to build emerging ecosystems, we do this globally as well. So I do a lot of work in indigenous communities.
Wow. Okay.
One of our major partners is Georgia Tech and their Enterprise Innovation Institute. And so we have locations in Puerto Rico, Colombia, Panama. We have programs in Shenzhen, China. And so our programs, we provide K through 12 platform as well. And then, of course, we work with departments of economic development, education, really any stakeholder that is trying to help the Black and Brown communities to build pathways to economic self-sufficiency. For me, entrepreneurship is social and economic justice. And so equitable pathways is important, and equity is something that has to be realized. And so I love creating space for that to happen. And some of those are through projects with government and private and public sector. And then others are programs that we work with. Our programs are held out of ATDC as well. I also, we run the core programming for the Russell Center in Atlanta for the developed stage entrepreneurs. So have our hands in a lot of equitable things right now. And so just happy to be there as a person of color who did start my business 16 years ago in a church basement.
Church basement. I hadn't heard that one before.
I did. And so I have, worked in the startup sector. I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, born and raised. So I grew up in the inner city on the block.
Oh, wow.
And so I do have a unique vantage point and an opportunity to being a gatekeeper, one of those people that does have access to social capital, and how can we build programs and access for our communities on the ground level to allow them to have equitable contribution in this innovation economy. So that is what I do.
Oh, yeah, that's really fantastic. And, I've been on this journey. I've always seemed to have been interested in doing entrepreneurship stuff. And I remember when I started learning about the startup ecosystem, and, I started doing a little, talks here and there throughout the community, but it was kind of hard for people to get it. but the idea that you could start from just an idea and get the help you need to turn that idea into something of value. And so what it meant to me was, you know, you, it said all you needed is an idea to get started. And then if you follow this methodology, you can grow that idea is worth zero, but you can go through this process and validate that idea, and just keep on increasing the value of that idea as you get to prototype your idea. You build a minimum viable product, and so your idea just becomes more and more valuable. But you could actually just start with the idea, and to me, that was like, that's I have never heard of anybody explain that to me. It's what it told me. I didn't have to go out and get a loan. To get my business going, and to think that just starting with the idea, I could actually get the help I need to move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, the work continues, right? I think entrepreneurship is a huge spectrum.
Yes.
So, helping our communities to see the many opportunities in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, that they're not just in one industry or one sector or the traditional industries and sectors, but and instead of focusing on, well, what kind of business do I want to start? It's like, what type of problems do I like to solve, or what type of problems need to be solved? So I think it is a mindset shift that has to happen to be able to also utilize those tools you're talking about, right?
Yes.
That mindset shift has to happen at the same time, and social capital is something that has to be built along with that idea, which is where you run into barriers with access, right, with our community. So I love programs like this that allow us to break down those barriers and come out of silos, right? Because that is where the inequities lie.
Yeah. And so, like, I'm glad you mentioned that part of it, because one of the things that I found, I did notice, the biases, about me being a Black founder in a majority white area, but I also noticed some of the benefits you get with being a founder. They were through the internet or web page, and you weren't subject to that bias to take advantage of the opportunity. And so I think a lot of people miss that when you get to this automation stuff. So I could have apply, like my first, I think it may have been was it my second thing I applied for, or my first? I think it may have been my first thing I applied for, and I didn't get selected to be a finalist, but so I didn't get the pitch, but I got invited to get a booth at the pitch event.
Nice.
But it was interesting, when we got to the event, one of the guys that was responsible and working the event, he kept apologizing to me, but I'm saying, why are you apologizing to me? And so I didn't know what he's talking about, but he mentioned this, kind of the location of my booth. It was like the worst location, but he was, something else was going on, but he didn't say it. And so what happened was, so after everybody got through pitching, like I said, my company didn't get the chance to pitch. And then I got called up to the stage for something from Microsoft.
Nice.
And so I don't know how I got selected for. I assume Microsoft or whoever made the selection. But that one little piece of paper turned out, starting at $60,000, and it turned out to be $60,000 plus $120,000. How much is that? $180,000 worth of value. So it was, it was irrespective of my race. And I think when I apply for stuff now, so last year I applied for some AWS credits, and it basically ended up getting $30,000 in AWS credits, but it's all through electronically.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And so you get a chance to get past that bias. And so I think a lot of people don't realize some of these systems. But then on the other hand, today starting last year, about a year ago, you started having the big companies set aside funding for Black and brown founders. So it's a pretty neat time to be involved in the startup world.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely. And I think for me, it's the important part for me is building infrastructure.
Yes. Okay. So kind of go dig into that a little bit for me.
Yeah. So Black founders have a unique trajectory, right?
Okay.
I think we face different challenges and barriers that have to be accounted for in the growth in the stages of a startup and a business, right? And so when we talk about access to resources, funding,
yes,
capital, not because capital does not always mean funding, right?
Yeah.
We talk about social capital, the infrastructure for the Black entrepreneur to begin the journey and have the support and access to those resources along the entire spectrum, right? It's a continuum.
Okay.
And so startup and entrepreneurship, much like business, and there are three different things, right? And entrepreneurship is different from startup, and startup is different from business. There's a knowledge gap.
Yes.
And so these little nuances impact the growth of a startup, the valuation of a startup. Not only do you have racial biases and things that play into that, but then there's the knowledge gap and the access. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we got to get in the game, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I think we have to get more folks in our community into the startup ecosystem, right? I think it's and have more resources and programs and supports like this to meet us where we are.
Yes.
But then to commit and have a infrastructure to support us along the journey, and it's a continuum. So you might go, you go forward, and it's not like, oh, are you being successful? Which means you're going to upswing. That's the old, industrial economy, and it was like, oh, if the business is, if it's doing well and it's increasing, well, startup is like, and then maybe exit or failure, right? So one of the interesting things is Black entrepreneurs and founders are not afforded the space to fail, right? You know that we have the same. We say you fail your way forward. It's much about how much can you fail and how fast.
Yes.
Right. To operate lean, to minimize the loss of investment of money, time, and social capital. Right.
Yes.
So it's almost like a race. And so we are not equipped with the resources, and we don't have an equitable start in that. So, however, we didn't have an equitable start or launch pad in the current or past economy, right? So I don't think in terms of, do I enter the startup? Absolutely, you do, right?
Yes,
because it is I do think we have a window of opportunity looking at the future of work, the fourth industrial revolution. There's a window of opportunity to have to create equity, right? And to ensure that communities of color have an equitable stake in it. And I believe wholeheartedly that the startup community is the pathway for that. And so I think so. Like I said, lots of work to be done.
Of course.
But we got to get in the game to close that gap. COVID just made it 10x. It made it faster. But you have been there, right? And so I think COVID just made people realize and brought it to a level where now more people are open and willing to have this conversation about, we will, you talk about the minority majority shift that's happening in this country. You see it playing out politically, the pushback and things that are happening with, people of color outnumbering, right? But at the equity still set to be upside down or even worse. So we're in a race to equity, right? And I think that technology, in which we were just talking about, provides us access to flip that at faster rate, but there's a sense of urgency. So I do think we need to do more work like this in all of our communities to get people onto that. But so anyway, I just, it's some interesting times and opportunities, but I do think that we have to have do a better job at bringing awareness
Yeah.
about this opportunity. And then you have the digital divide. That's the thing as well, understanding that not everybody has access to internet. We assume that, and honestly, some of our cities and states and towns and rural areas and inner cities, the infrastructure might look like a third, a developing country.
Mm-hmm.
So there's those realities that I think even some of us who I might say I grew up in the inner city, but understand that there are people who don't have that, live in areas like where they don't have access to internet or computer. And so launching something for them. So I think we have to create more, and even with us in the Black community, and creating more pathways to entrepreneurship, considering also those people and how we get them into it. So.
Yeah, and you started off by talking about the mindset, and so that's the that's the getting an aspiring founder or somebody that's not even thinking about being a founder yet, trying to help them understanding the mindset shift. When you start the founder startup journey, and that's the biggest challenge, and but that's a challenge for anybody getting that mindset right. But when you got all these other gaps you mentioned, and so one thing in my journey as a startup, when I retired from the government, I was developing some mobile technology and paying staff and doing all that stuff up front. And somebody told me about Pat told me about the business model canvas, and I said, "What the hell is that?" And I downloaded it on my iPad. The iPads that just came out, and so I looked at it, and it still didn't make sense. But when I tried to launch my product, I realized something was wrong, because you always talking about validate your customers and your users. So I made a mistake of validating my users who were using the app, but I didn't validate the customer, which would be the sponsors for the thing. And so after $200,000, I think I better learn this lean startup methodology.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. It's critical, I think. You think about it in the same way where, you went to school and you learned how to do certain things and use things because, you had to get a job. If you wanted to get a job, you had to learn how to do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. We're no longer living in an industrial economy. We live in an innovation economy. It is fluid. It is. So a startup, I don't think this is not, and I think some people do a disservice to the Black and brown communities because they talk about startup as if it's an option or choice, right? Like, oh, do you want to be a startup founder? Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Instead, what the messaging should be, and we all should be on one accord, this is something that you absolutely have to do. If you want to build generational wealth, if you want to create a pathway to economic self-sufficiency, business ownership is a choice. Entrepreneurship is not, right? And so, but within that lies a difference. Like, whoever told what's the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner or a startup? Three totally different things. And so I think we have to start bringing it down to the ground level, because I think those of us who do understand this work, who have been introduced to things like business model canvas, who ecosystem build. So I'm often challenging myself and bringing myself, if I were, back home in Jersey right now in my house, like if I go knock on somebody's door in a neighborhood on one of the blocks and say, hey, when's the last time have you heard of the business model canvas? Did you do it was like, what are you talking about? Girl, And so I think as we're building, right, these equitable pathways, as we're building these programs, and we have to keep that in mind, that we have to meet people where they are, not just entrepreneurs, right? So it's not everybody it's not about meeting people with ideas, because 9 times out of 10, their idea is horrible at first. And honestly, you're not really building anything great if the first version of it is good, right? So if you can look, y'all say you look back at your first product, website, whatever service, if it looked really good, then you probably weren't doing something right. If it's horrible, you probably were doing something right. It's not the idea. It's not the idea. It's the tenacity. It's the knowledge. It's the access to resources. It's the network. It's the ecosystem. It's the mentorship. It's all those things. And I think we just have to, in our communities, everybody talks about rebuilding Black Wall Street. Well, you have to understand it's not going to look the way and be built. I mean, they were disruptive and innovative in how they built it. They had strategy. We have to be strategic, but it has to also be built within the current landscape of, looking at the future of work and the fourth industrial revolution, reimagining Black Wall Street and what that needs to look like and what does. And so if we go and try to, that doesn't mean a bunch of businesses all in one area again. I mean, we live in a technological world, right? So that might mean we need Black Wall Street might look like we want X number of ideas coming out of the Black community being taken from idea from concept to commercialization each year. We want X amount represented in the blockchain industry and this industry. That is what it looks like. It may not look like, but what needs to be in the communities may look different, right? So I don't know. I just think that we just have to put more intention and strategy behind disrupting the current ecosystem or lack of there in our communities that puts our people on this pathway towards economic justice and social justice through entrepreneurship and innovation. And I think we have to build it together. So I love the fact that I'm in Atlanta, you're in Florida, and this is like cross capacity building, right? Because we don't have to have it all where we are. And I think a lot of people spend time, we don't have to launch 100 nonprofits to try to do something in one area. We have, okay, what's here in that state? How can we cross capacity build to move the needle faster, So.
Yes. And the ecosystem, it's not just local and it's not just regional. It's the whole world is an ecosystem and learning how to leverage that ecosystem to grow your company and make money, so it's just, to me, there are all of these roadblocks out there, but when I see pathways being built for Black and brown founders, it's really exciting. But on the other hand, if I see pathways being built, but if I also, on the other hand, don't see people of color understanding that this exists, what's the use in building the pathway if the Black and brown people don't really understand what the nature of all this stuff is? And so, and I think we're literally in a situation right now. When I started adding up the money that's been set aside for Black and brown founders, and not even scratching the surface, I'm already over $4 billion. And so the question is, is any of that money going to come to Northwest Florida? And the only way it's going to come to Northwest Florida is that we have, founders that understand the startup process and the methodologies and the best practices, and start from their ideal and build it on this foundation that's solid, and apply for some of these programs where that money is being distributed. And so that to me would be a travesty if people of color don't become aware of the opportunity, and the opportunity passes with time.
Yeah. No, I agree. So it's interesting how I look when I think of like the money, right, that's coming into the community or being put towards Black and brown entrepreneurship and business. And I for me, sometimes it has a sum of zero, right? Because the thing that is the easiest to do is usually the first response, right? So when George Floyd happened and the pandemic hit, and it was like, okay, the Band-Aid's been taken off. We've been exposed for all these inequities that we clearly have been yelling to the top of the mountain about for generations. but $4 billion, not a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's not,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not the money that is the barrier. That's the illusion that it is the
Mm-hmm.
money. Because to your point, though, I mean, you could even put all that money, but what good is it if you scalability and sustainability and acquisitions and mergers, those things, they don't require money. They require access to networks and
Yes. Yes.
and most of the opportunities that happen and most of the mergers, they happen through at the water cooler or at the back, but at somebody's house, or they happen at the social capital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the thing that they don't, the relationship that you have. I can pick up the phone and call my buddy in Switzerland and
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I'm thinking about it. So it's not like, somebody has an idea. The difference between somebody, have an idea and I give you, so two people, right? And I always give this analogy. You have two individuals. One, they both have great ideas. You give one $1 and one $100, right? And then the one that you give the dollar to, he has a massive network, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one that has the $100 bill, $1 million, just say $1 million.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a network. Who do you think is gonna get to the end of that race if the race is to build a startup that gets a valuation of 150 million billion dollars, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So,
the one with the social capital, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Because if you learn, but what level sets though is learning these processes, because if you learn the processes right, you understand you don't need money to build a viable, scalable business model. You don't need money to prototype money. And so money becomes money is for expansion and
Mm-hmm.
scale,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not to start, right? To your point, you don't need it to start. But what you do need to start are relationships.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need trust. You need access to who has or creates a pathway for you to the money. So if I'm building for something and I know
Mm-hmm.
I have access to, or a contract, right? You think of let's just talk about a service-based business, right? A
Mm-hmm.
consulting company. We have a buddy like, oh, I'm going to start a consulting company. I'm leaving my day job, whatever, I'm starting a consulting company. It's not easy for Black and brown people to start consultancy companies, right? The trajectory is different because your network, who determines like those contracts. And then even if you say, I'm going to put you at a CEO roundtable, right? We're going to have a program for Black entrepreneurs and we're going to introduce, all the top CEOs are going to come.
Mm-hmm.
That CEO roundtable, in a sense, like you would think that itself really doesn't do me a lot of good, right? Because when it comes to getting that contract, and once that CEO, that 1 or 2 hour of FaceTime is over, is it the CEO that's going to be on the phone and showing, like in the procurement office, or making sure that the contract gets followed through? And so what you see is you'll follow up with those people a year later who were invited to this meeting with a roundtable of CEOs from the top companies. Yeah. How does that move the needle in my business? So I just think that we progress, just like in civil rights, just like in anything. I was talking with Nathaniel from Partnership for Southern Equity, and we were talking about innovation.
Okay.
And he said something, and she's like, you know what? Everybody's saying innovation, entrepreneurship. But if we're not strategic and intentional, and if we're not careful, we can innovate ourselves back into poverty. We can innovate ourselves back into so it's not, I think it's just, we have to have a strategy, and we have to be cohesive, and we have to not, that money, to your point about building an ecosystem and people not being in it. I mean, you give $4 billion, and if their social capital is not matching.
Yeah. So I get your point, and so the and I'll try to kind of bring that point home a little bit. And so I tell people about my story, and my I ended up having a successful coming from out of poverty, my ancestors coming out of slavery and raised in Jim Crow South. I came up I was a child during the civil rights movement, and so my mom and father were poor, but my father didn't live with us, and my granddaddy farmed because that was the only way he made money. But the deal was, my success in life were through connections, that I made, and I didn't realize how important that was at the time,
Yep.
but I ended up having a successful career working for the government and winning national awards. But when I look back, at all of that success, it was through relationships and connecting and networking. So
Yep.
back in the early '90s, I started hosting networking events, and I haven't stopped.
Yep.
And the reason I didn't know the reason why I was doing it at the time until like around 2010 or something. I was being interviewed on a podcast, and the guy made me realize, I was doing it. So if I can have a successful career through networking and get connected to resources, to move forward, then that's the secret to
Yep.
to success. So like in life and in this, so in the startup world, what I noticed when I travel around the country and in Europe, and the bottom line was they every Thursday night they had networking events.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you connected with all these different people. And so if I'm traveling, if I'm in St. Louis and I'm going to be there on a Thursday night, I look and see what all the networking things are, because that's how you get connected. In Dallas, the same way. In London, the same way. In San Francisco, the same way. And so you get these connections, and then you try to strengthen these relationships that you have with these connections. And so, in San Francisco, ended up, meeting the lady that's the head of automation for IBM, you start making all these connections, but it's still a challenge to build a relationship. And so, but the deal is, if you're working on a startup and you're doing something that's different and unique, and it can help somebody, then that's your leverage for that connection to build that relationship, and that's kind of what's important. So people through the pandemic, they said, well, we're not having any person event. And so we were doing this event called the Bantucola Network, and so my wife said, well, we're probably going to have to stop now because of the COVID. I said, I didn't say hell no, but in my mind, hell no, we ain't stopping. Because I know there's some technology out there that'll let people connect and help people connect.
Yes. Yes.
And so, and in the start, so just to give you an example, we through the startup on the block and the networking, we met so many people that can provide support for our local founders and give them to fill all these gaps you were talking about. And so that to me is powerful. I went to a first in-person networking event here last night, and made some decent connections that are potentially meaningful. And so, but that's the power of it, because I don't know what resources you're connected to, or you don't know what resources I'm connected to, and by getting together and building a relationship, you can actually help each other leverage connection to move each person forward. But if you don't network, you don't have no social. Like I said, you don't have no social capital.
Yeah, you don't have, yeah, and that's the when I say people talk, how much, this company get, and I said, when they start coming up with things based on social currency, then I'll feel like now they given something, equity, a part of equity shouldn't feel unfair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not, when you think of those who hold that capital and hold those resources, it shouldn't feel unfair, but a part of it should be uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And require a level of sacrifice. And I just, but when money like that is given away so easily,
Mm-hmm.
it tells me that, I'm like,
yeah. I don't necessarily think it's given away easily, because I still say, it's all based on this this process, and this ability to create value in the startup. So like if you want to pitch to get some of this money, it's all going to be based on what every what level, where are you in your startup journey. And so there's this thing called investor readiness level. And so as you move up this investor readiness level, your idea becomes more invaluable. So the first thing when I see a founder, they ask me for advice or mentor, I know this investor readiness level, and so I can see where they are on this journey. In the government, we used technology readiness levels to find out where this technology is, and so it goes the same in a startup. And so you can have an idea, and you don't do you don't do the methodology, you don't prove get these product market fit or this, or do everything you need to do with your customers. It's a bad foundation. Your startup is going it may succeed, but it's going to be rough because you can't skip any steps and expect to move forward. But I do understand the color of my skin does make the difference on whether somebody does business with me or can make the difference. But I do also understand if in life, if there's money set aside for Black and brown founders, and you prove that you're ready for that, you have an opportunity to get that. But you have to realize that's the way it is for Black people. There's traditionally, there's the opportunities, or there's roadblocks to the opportunity. But when stuff is set aside, it opens the door for a few people to take advantage of those opportunities. And so that's because of the implicit bias in our country, and a lot of people don't want to admit it, but that is the fact. Throughout my whole career, if there wasn't a program, there was no Black people getting in the door at where I used to work. There was no money being spent at Black universities unless there was a program. And so what I'm communicating is that now there's a program for Black and brown founders to take advantage of some of this opportunity. But the neat thing is, what I've seen over and over again, the Black and brown founders that become successful, they always come back in the ecosystem and help the ecosystem grow. And so that's the beauty of it. Yeah.
I think it's I think we have to be intentional about operating from a place of abundance, right? Not scarcity. But we also have to be realistic, and we have to disrupt. So I'm a disruptor. So I would also say we don't have to accept that, right? We don't have. I think what's interesting about this generation and about what is happening now in the movement is that the problem is, again, not the money that's being set aside. It is the tools that are being used to validate whether or not a company is investor ready. So until these companies start to invest money into disrupting those things and policies that say, when a Black entrepreneur stands up to pitch, that they're understanding like their trajectory and that their investor readiness level may look different, not less or more, but different than a white person or more privileged. And so until we begin to shape our processes and systems around that, it's pouring money into a systemically racist system and process is, again, for me, sum of zero, because it's not sustainable.
Yes.
In those same businesses, while we might, and we have a lot, I think, just like we always do, we're a resilient people. They come back in the community, but I also hear a lot of some of the top startup and tech founders, and a lot of them are colleagues of mine, and they will tell you, if you sit in private with them, that visibility doesn't equal investment.
For sure.
They're still struggling. A lot of them are still struggling because, again, it's a continuum and it's a spectrum. But I say all that to say, again, we have to get in the game.
Yeah,
we have to get in the game, but we have to go in eyes wide open. And so that's what I'm saying. If we are going to build an equitable ecosystem and for ourselves and not rely, we have to be realistic, not accepting what the current status is. But I want startup founders to launch your startups, Black and brown founders, launch your startups and your ideas, but launch them and be disruptive. Not just, and understanding that when you launch a startup, and this is whether you're Black or white or like in ATDC, John Avery said to me in a conversation one time, he's the director of ATDC. And so we talk a lot. We have really deep conversations. He's like, well, I want my founders to understand that just the startup that you're building is not about you. It's not for you. You're building something for the world. You're
Yes.
solving the problem. There's a greater bearing. So the same to be true for Black entrepreneurs and founders,
Yes.
right? And our plight is, and still as is, because we're fighting for economic and social justice, that you might be solving a problem in the clean energy space, or you might be providing food service, but understand that you're building not just for you or solving that problem, but for justice and so disrupt and don't accept the status quo. And so yes, we're going to pitch, we're going to get the money, right? We're going to get it and build, but we have to have not just looking at it for our startups, but instead also how the ecosystem and building strategy around. And so again, we go back to being connected and not being in silos as we're building. So don't get the tool and go off and build on your own. You come and you build, but we also, as ecosystem builders, have to create space for that to happen. Equity is not something that's implemented. It has to be realized, and so it happens over time. And so I think while we're giving these tools out, we have to have a mandate, right, as well, that you're not just you build a startup, not just because, like somebody said, I don't have a business idea, I don't really want to start. It's not a choice, right? It's a must. If you want to build generational wealth, if you want to build, get in and learn the tools and then disrupt. Get in and launch your startup and then disrupt, And so I think that strategic, cohesive, intentional disruption of both building startups and then those of us, who come back and help to disrupt, I think that's going to help us move the needle, because again, we see there's a lot of activity, and to your point, a lot of networking, and I see a lot of networking, but not a lot of net weaving.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a cultivation of relationships, both with each other, within the Black and Brown communities. And there's an art and science to cultivating those relationships and being very focused on your startup and the problem that you're solving and being committed to that startup. Right. So which is why startup is not the same as entrepreneurial endeavor or a business. Right. A startup is something you are committed to finding a business model that works for this problem. And so that way, when those relationships come in, you should be the reason people invest in angel investors, because they're like, oh my God, he is so focused on solving this problem, and commit to something that you're passionate about, a problem that is worth solving for you. Commit to that and bring others along. That's when you look at your startup team, right? Bring others along who are just as committed to solving this problem, because sometimes 90% of startups fail, which is the truth. However, now what you're saying, we have now programs and things that are trying to create space for us to do that. And so just get in the space, get in the space, learn a tool, get on the ground. And then I think, but everybody has to do it. I don't think it's a choice.
Oh yeah. I agree that everybody has to become aware of the situation we're in and help them move the needle. And you're absolutely right. If there isn't always money there for Black and Brown founders continuously forever, it's just a band-aid. And so that's kind of what the deal is. And it's kind of funny. That's what my wife Robin said the first time I mentioned that to her. So that's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. Yeah.
Hey guys, how are y'all doing? I'm Lloyd Jr.
Hello.
Great, Lakeisha, wonderful talk, and I love wherever you all are going. I have a couple of questions I want to bring up from the chat, just that people have been bringing out. Two of them are definitions. One is, what is an ecosystem? I think that is, can you define a startup ecosystem, what that is and what the industry is calling that? And then the other one is define the net weaving that you were talking about.
Yeah, sure. So the startup ecosystem is a collective, right, so to speak, of stakeholders. And so same when you look at the education, economic development, city government, private sector, public sector, what we call anchors, right? Folks who are providing resources that help to support entrepreneurs as they move along the continuum, the journey of launching a startup or business, right? The stages of business growth, right? You go through many stages and it's like a pendulum, it swings, right? So entrepreneurship is not whoosh, you go here, or you either go and fail, it goes back and forth. And so the ecosystem are the safeguards that are there to be able to provide support for you and triage, and at those points that you needed to get you, even though you might be moving back and forth, every time you go back forward, almost like the energy, right, it pulls and you propel. So the idea is like this level of proficiency in entrepreneurship. As the more you fail at startups, you launch 2-3 businesses. Well, by the time you launch your 4th business, you have had so much experience and understanding. But as you're moving along that and feeling those pains of failure and growing, you've had, support, whether it's from, technical assistance, your finances, it's all those organizations, programs, departments that have committed to supporting and building out infrastructure. That's the infrastructure building out. So that's an ecosystem where it responds to the needs of the entrepreneur that is building a startup. So a startup ecosystem is built for that. And so that has to be there has to be a cohesiveness to that, right? And so, and it says that entrepreneurship is very lonely. Ideally, startup is even lonelier. But it's the idea of breaking down the silos, right, and cross capacity building. So it's not just the organizations and different supports that are there to provide programming and training and all those things, funding, but also the entrepreneurs themselves, right, are a part of the ecosystem. Everybody that plays a part in helping businesses and really ideas. And so when somebody's from ideation, the idea, the concept, to commercializing it, right? And not that every idea has to go from concept to commercialization, right? Startups are also not meant to always mature. You have to decide what your startup is meant for. Some startups are built to be acquired by bigger companies. It's built to solve a problem and create a model that solves that problem, and then you might want to grow it out. So Google started off as a startup, but they are no longer a startup. They are a business, right? And they have problems that businesses have now in large corporations. So that's what an ecosystem is. And in net weaving, so one of the things we see, we're working with Georgia Tech and Morehouse Center for Innovation, our company Chronology, to build a Southeast business growth hub, right? That's supposed to connect regions from Florida to Kentucky, the different states, to build equitable pathways for Black entrepreneurs to get resources. So if you're in Florida and there's you happen to be in the let's just throw it out there, fashion industry or something, and they might have a program or a training that you need, right, to solve a problem in your business, but it's not there where you are, then how can we make it easy for you to identify and access quality resources that are going to actually help you as a Black entrepreneur without you having to spend and waste time navigating this ecosystem, and you can spend that time working on your business. So we create this hub, right? Net weaving is like that, right? Almost like a hub. Networking, you can talk to a ton of people, right? And so this is what we see, like even in Atlanta, and people will tell you there's a lot of activity, right? There is a lot of busyness. I would say, there's business and busyness, but lack of connectivity, right? A lot of activity, no connectivity, networking, not net weaving, where our relationships yield in something very fast, right? In a sense, because we live in a technological, fluid, innovative, accelerated, call it what you want, economy. And so net weaving is important because the relationships respond to where relationships meet you where you are, right? So there's networking where you meet people and you may not know, you might 5-10 years from now reach that person. So networking is important, right? But net weaving is meant to help you to mitigate issues and solve problems so that you can grow in whatever, whether you're building a business or if you're sick or something, right? And so you net weave in terms of that person has a solution that I need at this time. And so so that means like you're following up with them the next day, right? Or they're responding to you. You have this relationship and that resources exchange instead of sitting in a Rolodex. And so that's what that would breed, that connectivity, as opposed to just, you might have a Rolodex of, or a phone on your, thousands of numbers, but who can you really call on at this moment in your journey, or, you know, when you reach your next plateau, that you can say, hey, and they're aware of what's happened in your business and where you were at step A, and you might not need them at step A, but they understand, and you have a relationship and communication, or keep them aware, whether it's through, and it could be newsletters, or however you keep in contact with the people that you are in the ecosystem building relationships with, and how accessible they are to you when you need them to solve a particular problem that might be acute, but very detrimental to your business growth at the time. So that's kind of like what net weaving is. Networking is like, I have a ton of people I could tap, but like, do you really have a relationship?
Yeah. So I like that answer, and you know, I look at it, you know, my model of networking, and you know, with the networking events we do, we have the events for you to make connections, and so, but you have to strengthen that relationship in that connection, because if that connection is not strengthened, it's less valuable. But the problem you have, if you may be connected to somebody, but if you don't actually know the resources that person or that company or that entity has, you might as well not be connected to it.
Right. Well, then it's not really connectivity. It's like, so because connectivity, like what you like, that's the whole point of like, right. When we have, like you said, you got to follow up. So so like people can put on networking events, but it's up to the individual. So let's just say, if you want to look at network and net weaving, organization can put on a networking event, but not a net weaving event. Net weaving is something you have to do yourself. You have to cultivate, right? The relationship, you have to do the weaving, right? And so sitting down, figuring out, you come back from an event and you got 20, 30 people on your thing. And so you looking at, what are my the problems that I need to solve, whether it's in this idea I'm building, whether it's like in my personal life, whatever it is. You might've met 20 financial advisors. It's like, where am I having the most pain at right now in my life? And where, from me trying to go from point A to point B, and then looking at that network you have, and who are the people who can help. And then you go in and you have relationships, you know, you start building and cultivating that relationship to understand what the resources they have are, and how those might, and really communicating with them also what you're going through, and not just calling them when you need the help, but talking to them even when you don't need them. Because what you more need people to understand, I can't help you. So if, like, somebody might have me in their phone, and if they call me and say, hey, can you help me do XYZ? I might say, oh yeah, I can try to see, you know, but can you be more specific? That's like networking, right? But a net woven relationship is like, somebody calls me and I know that person, we've had touch points, right? I understand, we've had contact, or they've kept me abreast to what's happening in their journey, whether good or bad, right? And so by the time they call me and say, oh my God, Lakeisha, I'm like struggling with this, I can give them an informed feedback, or tap into my resource. I know exactly what I'm like. Oh yeah, because I remember like 6 months ago or a year ago, you had that pitch competition, and you said, you know, that was kind of frustrating, because they made the effort to reach out to share the experience, whether bad or good, with me. And so now where they are in a problem, I know exactly what to pull from my resources to help them. And they don't have to figure that out. I figure that out for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think he had two other questions, but I think one that we would love for you all to use this last 4 minutes on. What do you think about the SBA's new Community Navigator pilot program started by the Biden-Harris administration?
Really want me to answer? I think it is. I'm curious.
Are you all familiar with that? Because I wasn't personally familiar, but
yeah. And if you want to, like, for other people to, you know, to talk about it for a second, but I'm curious about it. I think right now, in this time of equity realization, I'm waiting for it to be realized. I think we just have to see. I honestly, like, I think it matters more, not what you're building, who's building it and how it's being built. So I'm always interested to see who's doing the work, and if that is equitable, right? So you know, you can put an announcement out about anything that might sound like a good tool or good, but it's like, I want to look, you know, is it people of color? Is it people that not, you know, understand, you know, who's doing the work? And how are they being intentional, and is there gatekeeping involved? So I'm always more curious than like being able to make a decision. And we'll see, right? I think we'll see.
Yeah, I think like with any government program or funding mechanism or any mechanism from the city or any mechanism from the county, what are the normal hurdles that are there for you to get a minority organization to get some of that money? And so the question is, how is it, if these organizations have been subject to all this bias for so long and held back, how the system is not, it's been designed to hold you back. So how are you going to have the capacity to get the contract or the grant when you've been held back? And so there has to be some strategies and partnerships, to make these things happen. And I think that's the key thing. People have to remember there's always a way to do something, but still it's based on a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what you always have to remember. I'll give a quick example. Locally here, our United Way shepherded a mothered an organization that the community wanted. It's called Achieve Escamia. So Achieve Escamia is in its fifth year now, but this is the first year they have their 501(c), but the United Way, mothered them until they got the capacity to pay staff to stand on their own. Yeah. What if that same model had to happen for a Black nonprofit, or other minority nonprofits? And it's the same way. It's the same way in businesses. You have to have the capacity to do the work, and you don't just instantly have the capacity to do the work. In this Navigator program, what Black organization has the capacity to do the work?
To do the work, right?
Yeah.
That's why I said who and how, right? It's like, who's doing it? Like, like you said, those questions, like, where's the capacity? It's like they skip off. So the model appears to be good, but I'm always interested in what their I always say disrupt, but strategic disruption, right? Mm-hmm. So what's their strategy? Because you have to be disrupting something. So like, what are they disrupting? And so when I look at models like that, and if they're not disrupting anything, then I'm like, well, that's not going to yield in any different type of outcomes. It's not going to be sustainable because the system upon which is being built is inequitable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, but what impact do you think your hub is going to make in all these things? You think it's just going to have these hard-weave relationships these connections, and so your strategy is to make sure the Black and brown businesses throughout the Southeast have this connection to these resources. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's the idea. It's a vetting system, right? Mm-hmm. So it's because we know that one of the biggest pain points that Black and brown entrepreneurs experience is that they spend so much time trying to navigate and figure out who, because you have so many incubators and accelerators and programs right now. Some people are being victimized with some of these things. They don't even know it, right? Because everybody, not everybody understands entrepreneurship and startup. And so, and if you have people who don't understand it themselves, just entering it, and they're relying on these people who say that where's the checks and balances in that, right? Because that's a pathway to inequity as well. And sort of re-victimization of the Black and brown communities. And so how do we prevent that and build an equitable ecosystem? So what you might pull up on a Startup Atlanta or Florida website in terms of what are the resources, how do we know those are the resources that are quality and actually help Black and brown businesses? And so we're almost coming in like creating a equitable map of this ecosystem, but a vetting system where the partners who we have as resources, they don't just get to land on it because they say that they have something. We are building from a data perspective, qualitative and quantitative data on that's coming from Black entrepreneurs, who's helped you, who has been supportive, what has it helped you with. So we might have an organization on our thing. And so the idea is that you come to the hub and we've done that vetting for you, right? Where you know that you're walking into an equitable hub that is going to be able to support you on your journey, right? In terms of what access you need, and that these organizations have done the work and are being equitable in doing that. And so it's our job. So you don't have to, so you can spend more time working on your business than trying to figure out, how do I get to the resources to help me? We're figuring out who's really helping these businesses. And then we don't need to recreate the wheel we can spend less money, or each state or city can spend less money on, funding all these new different programs, but instead cross capacity building in terms of, if Atlanta has a really good thing, or if North Carolina has really good in this sector, then why don't we give access to the Black entrepreneurs access to those things there without them having to leave and move? Because, some people might be able to jump up and move to another state and where there's an industry and where their businesses they're starting their business and that industry's booming, but they don't even have some people don't have the money for gas for the week, so it's like, how am I going to move to Tennessee or move to Florida, but I should be able to access those resources. We don't have to recreate things. If they're really valuable resources, then how do we bring more access and get these organizations to work together to create more equitable pathways, so that we don't have all this sporadic, and for all this activity that so connectivity is the key, is for us to connect the different states and cities, the resources, so that you can, ideally, whether open up a website or being a part of the hub, it's like, I can breathe a little bit, because I know amongst this, they've done that thinking around, what are my specific needs as a BIPOC entrepreneur, and then I can plug into what the resources are, and then of course, then it's up for me to, but at least I know that these are valuable, equitable resources that I can access.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And so, is the Minority Business Development Center, are they going to be providing any services to the entrepreneurs?
Yep. So so we're not developing any type of programs, but instead we're finding who is providing good programs, and those will be our anchor partners, right?
Yes.
That will be in a hub. And then when we might identify gaps where the entrepreneurs are saying that this is a pain point, we don't see any programs like this, then we have recommendations on these are the type of so now the money being invested, well, you probably invested in this because here's what Black entrepreneurs are saying their pain point is, and instead of you investing in another incubator, instead you might need a specific program around an acute issue that Black entrepreneurs are dealing with, and then we make that available again across the Southeast, right? And so where they can access it. So a lot of to me, the investment for them on this project was one of the most equitable things I've seen, because they haven't invested in a program, or they're investing in validating resources for Black entrepreneurs and understanding what the pain points of Black entrepreneurs are and who's providing those resources. And then, we'll see in phase 2, there may be programs that develop out of it, but we're not just going to jump and build. Those are going to be built by coming from the mouths and experiences of the entrepreneurs, almost responding to where they are, and then us, being able to guide investments and getting organizations to, invest in the hub and expanding this out, as opposed to just investing in these sporadic different things. Invest in equitable resources for entrepreneurs that are accessible. We get these organizations to make a commitment to be accessible across state lines, and if they don't want to step up to do that, it's okay, but it's just if you're trying to be equitable for Black entrepreneurs, it's not always money you have to throw at things, but access. That's what we're saying. We want the access. Oh, we do this amazing program, but you only offer it for 30 people every 6 months, and people got to come and fly here and do it. How Black entrepreneurs are going to access. So can you provide this virtually? Can you or open it up so that other people can come, or can you that is being, so we're asking them to show up and be equitable and open up their access and their resources, and not necessarily, we don't want you to, and then the companies and foundations and corporations who are giving money, if they invest in the hub, they're investing in helping those anchor organizations that are part of our hub to help them build capacity to provide even more access, since they have committed to providing that cross-regional access for entrepreneurs.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I'm glad to hear. Yeah, we want to get all of the folks here to sign up for that. Yeah. Well, Lakeisha, we appreciate you
Thank you.
coming on. Apologize for running a little over here, but I think it was important getting the word out and the messaging out. So we thank you and look forward to building the relationship as we were talking about.
Yeah,
with all the other places and keeping the ball rolling.
Yeah, but I will say, and I like to walk my talk. So I just mentioned about the SBA program. The hub I'm a Black-owned organization, right? I'm the founder CEO. I'm partnered with Morehouse, a historically Black college. We're partnered with Georgia Tech, who their MBDA. Who has made a commitment. So we've hired 2 Black and Brown catalysts in ATDC to be there to support strictly just BIPOC tech entrepreneurs. All of the leads on this project are Black women, Black and Brown women. And so it matters who's doing the work. So if you engage with the hub, you will see me. You won't not see me. And so we're the ones doing the work, which is really
fantastic.
important.
Oh, great. So has Blanca participated in this program? All righty, we're going to go ahead and sign off since we're over time. Catch you all next week. Look forward to having Tom as a guest. Thank you all. Bye-bye.